Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the SmeeSports YouTube channel. And today it is finally time to begin our podcast. The podcast with no name for right now, as it is nearly 10 o'clock at night. And I did not think of a name heading into this. You're going to ask the other two alongside me today. This was a last second thing, but as I told them before we got started, there's no better time to start than now. But going through who is here with us today, we have our very own MAC writer, Dan Ridenour, and then the man who is a big fan of Omar Martinez and a man who is currently in between personas on social media. It's Gabe Cozza. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Yeah, it
Doing
is.
great.
Shout
How
out
are
Omar
you, Nate?
Martinez.
Doing good, doing good. This should be a fun and I would say laid back experience as we talk about some sports. Today's specific conversation, as you can see by my background and Gabe's background, we're going to talk football, but also going to mix in some baseball. And then Dan, at the end of this, is going to talk about his experience covering the MAC Kickoff Event as he met Eddie George, and I'm sure that was a surreal experience for you, Dan. But we'll harp on that a little bit later on in the podcast. To kick things off, I think we need to start off with the biggest nugget of information that we have heard from the Browns camp all offseason, and that is that Shedeur Sanders is going to be the starting quarterback week one of preseason. Gentlemen, this was a big point of contention throughout the offseason. The moment that Shedeur was drafted to the Browns, there was hope by a lot of Browns fans that he would start. But then on the opposite end, a lot that never wanted him to see the field. Your thoughts on the appointment of Shedeur to be the week one preseason starter?
I guess I'll go first. I think it's interesting. Like the Browns season, it's kind of, they're kind of in a retooling, rebuilding year. It really looked like they had an opportunity to turn this entire franchise around with Baker Mayfield. Obviously, it doesn't work out there, but they're in an interesting situation. They didn't take a lot of risk by drafting Shadur. So why not? With the current roster construction and with the way the division is, the AFC North, with how competitive it is, I don't want to sound pessimistic for Browns fans, but it just seems very unlikely that a playoff berth is possible. So why not give the young rookie a chance and see what happens? And if it doesn't go out well, you have a potential for a top 10 pick and a loaded QB class with a lot of upside there.
Yeah, Cleveland's definitely, I kind of talked about it going into, when they were rolling into the season. I called that they had one of the worst cute quarterback rooms, in the league. And there was quite kind of some speculation whether we were going to draft, Shador early in the first round, my Steelers, and we ended up going with Derek Carmen. But, I feel like Gabe's right that Shador, it's going to be cool to see him kind of go out there and just get his opportunity. There's not a lot. And the thing, too, you play the Panthers, you play the Eagles. So you kind of got both sides of the ball. The Eagles have been real dominant lately, and then the Panthers are struggling too. So you can kind of see the preseason, see how Shador goes. I'm not going to say like he's going to be the next Tom Brady or nothing, but Shador's not like a horrible bust. I feel like he's going to be a more middle of the road quarterback, if that makes sense.
I would have to agree there, as there's a lot behind that decision. The first thing with it is quite simple. Is this a move made to win football games? Is this a move made to develop a quarterback? Or is this a move made to keep the fans happy? You never want to bring up that question with a quarterback, but given everything that has surrounded this organization and everything that does right now, let's look at this on paper. You have six quarterbacks on your roster. The guy making $230 million guaranteed is not even in contention to start, not even play a game this year. Beyond that, you have a quarterback whose dad was an all-time great in the NFL and is one of the very rare two-way players, not meaning both sides of the ball, but two sports, as Deion Sanders was also a great baseball player. Everything beyond that. You go back in history, a long line of Browns quarterbacks that never panned out, Johnny Manziel comparisons. There's a lot of pressure for the Browns to get this one right. I think Shedeur, if he is going to succeed, it is going to have to start in this preseason. I think he can do it. I think I'm in the minority here, but if he can put his head down, if he can just focus on his craft, there's a good football player in there. And I think if we took away the name of Sanders, we look at him as a basic quarterback prospect, he could be a serviceable, at worst, backup, kind of like a Josh Dobbs in this league. And I think that's kind of a fair comparison to make, at least for now, unless he goes out and proves that he can be a starter, which the jury's still out on that. But then looking forward to the later news that predated it, the depth chart is not too forgiving to our buddy Shedeur Sanders, as it was reported by Tony Grossi. That was one of the first ones that we saw. The depth chart goes like this. Fourth is Shedeur Sanders. Third, Dillon Gabriel. Second, Kenny Pickett. Steelers fans, I think you understand how that went. And then number 1, Joe Flacco.
Oh yeah,
First thing,
don't remind us,
to
Smee.
state here before I get to you, Dan. You look at those quarterbacks outside of Shedeur. Those 3 quarterbacks have caused a lot of pain to the state of Ohio, whether it be rivalry or not. Dillon Gabriel with Oregon. We all remember how Will Howard felt after that tough game this year. Kenny Pickett, he was on the Steelers, and then Joe Flacco, a Super Bowl champion. It's just a weird room. But if that depth chart is accurate, I'll go to Dan first. What are your thoughts on that, as it doesn't really look right?
Well, Nate, the thing is with Cleveland this year, and I might be the pot calling kettle black here as a Steelers fan, but the only way they're getting to the Super Bowl is if they buy a ticket. Like, I feel like Cleveland, they may make the playoffs this season, they may not, but the reality is that they have some guys who are unproven, some guys who are just established. They're going to start for a team, like the Panthers, the Cardinals, the teams that are kind of struggling right now. And we both agree, we both of us, Gabe and I's teams wanted to get rid of Kenny Pickett. And now he's in Cleveland. But looking at the standard now here, what is Cleveland trying to do? And I feel like they are going to understand. They may struggle a little bit, but I also feel like they're not putting all their eggs in one basket at this time.
Gabe?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Did you mention Tyler Huntley as well on the quarterback depth chart as well?
He was not listed on the depth chart.
I'm sorry, I might have missed that.
The reason why he wasn't listed on that depth chart is because the signing was announced hours after that post was made. So that's why. But he's not even figured into this.
But not, I mean, nonetheless, they have a lot of guys there. But it's what's going on in Cleveland. There's a lot of there's a few players on this team that are very good. In my personal opinion, Denzel Ward, best cornerback in the league. Myles Garrett, top 3 edge rusher in the league. And Jerry Jeudy. I give Andrew Berry a lot of credit. I give him flack on a lot of his other decisions, but they bought early on Jerry Jeudy, and it's paying off. He was an elite receiver last year on really not great quarterback play. So I'm excited for Jerry Jeudy if Joe Flacco can start. And I think even with Shedeur, he has a lot of upside. But Cleveland, it's not all doom and gloom because, the quarterback class is very loaded and they are tanking at the right time. But man, easier said than done to hit on a quarterback. And if you look at their offensive line, it's aging and there's a lot of injury concerns there too. So that's another sort of facet of their team that they're going to have to fix up. But you got to get the quarterback right first.
And I think with that quarterback class coming up next year, you have to be careful, as there's one name specifically linked to Cleveland that you look at his high school days, you look at his college days, he might not be ready to take that next step into the NFL. And you look at the lineage before him, it's very similar to Ohio State, where the quarterback conversion rate's not great, and that's Drew Aller. Now, I will say Drew Aller has one heck of a talented arm, and he is actually a really good player. I think he is one of the best players in that class. But you have to look at the additional facts, and that's the big thing about the NFL. We saw with guys like Justin Fields, the late Dwayne Haskins, uber talents at college, but they go to the NFL, they just don't have that. So that then becomes a big question. Who do you put your money on the line for? Do you try and target Aller? Is Nussmeier your guy? Or are you going to say, okay, so-and-so decided that they were going to go and ball out this year and became a Heisman candidate, and that's who we go with? It's going to be a scary decision for Cleveland if they go with a quarterback next year. I just don't know if that is the right time. To be fair, every year you could say there is a reason the Browns should go after a quarterback, but we'll see how this year goes, as this could be the surprise breakout of Shedeur Sanders, or for some reason, week 5, everybody's out. Kenny Pickett gets a shot, and he becomes the quarterback we expected him to be out of Pitt. And going back to Pittsburgh now, that's a good segue into their section. Another team who could be feeding at the quarterback feast next offseason, you have Aaron Rodgers on a 1-year rental, as that's pretty much what he has said the parting line is. See Dan representing. And then on top of that, you have Will Howard. Will can be a good quarterback. I believe he does have a knock right now. The question is, if you are the Steelers, where do you even stand right now? Are you a team trying to get a top pick? Are you a playoff contender? Or are you in the worst spot to be in the NFL? And that's NFL purgatory. Dan, I'll toss it to you as you showed your Patriots, or not Patriots, Steelers patriotism.
Yeah, definitely. It runs in the blood. It's been ride or die with my black and gold for a long time. But, the standard is the standard. Doing a lot of research on this team lately, just seeing, what they've been about. And there was kind of, I feel like Pittsburgh didn't know when they needed to actually start rebuilding. Like they rode the Big Ben train for too long. Le'Veon Bell was busy partying Miami. Antonio Brown had CTE. Those are things that, kind of can control. Some things you just can't. But for now, I'm a big fan of Will Howard. I know there could have been better, I say in quotes, with quarterbacks in this class, but I was a huge Will Howard fan. I feel like he's going to do a good job. Unfortunate with his injury, but we knew Aaron Rodgers was going to start from the get go, and I feel like his prime's a little past right now. But getting T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith, they're going to be really good on the defensive side of the ball. And when it comes to offense, Najee Harris going to L.A. and George Pickens going to Dallas kind of cleared some things up where they can kind of clear house. And I always said it too. I always felt like Jalen Warren was better than Najee Harris at that running back position. So I feel like Pittsburgh's kind of getting the things in order. But two, they're in one of the toughest, if not the toughest division in the NFL, where they got to take on a top three team in the AFC twice a year. And Baltimore has just right now built a brick wall with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on the offense, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely. So they are going to have to get through Baltimore, and that is no easy feat.
Gabe, we'll toss it to you. You also a big Steelers fan. What's your angle on this offseason? As Dan said, there's a lot of moving pieces there. And if there's even a shot that they can compete in the AFC, they have to get through two of the top teams. I know Dan said one of the top three, but I think you can say easily two of the top five, if not top four, even top three, if you want to be that drastic. And that depends on how highly you rate the Bengals right now.
This Steeler organization, I mean, Dan said it perfectly. It's the Steeler way, and really they're living on a prayer. You need a good offense to win in the NFL. You need a good quarterback to win in the NFL. And Steelers don't have the quarterback, and offensively, they have a young offensive line. Receiver depth, there's a lot of questions there. I know Calvin Austin has become a good player, but with his size limitations, I don't know how much he can really do. And DK Metcalf is pretty much almost a carbon copy of George Pickens. So I feel like we know what we're getting there. I do expect Jonnu Smith to become a big part of this offense. But really, this team reminds me of the 2019 Steelers. If you remember that team, they were amazing defensively. You had breakouts from a guy like Steven Nelson. Joe Hayden had one of the best seasons of his career. You had Mika Fitzpatrick breakout. You, of course, had TJ. You had Cam. You had a defense that was able to create turnovers, and it kind of mitigated a very slow, unproductive offense. And I mean, they're going to have to do that again this year, but there's so many good quarterbacks in the AFC. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. I just don't see a way that this team goes past the divisional round. I think they can win a wild card round. I think they can win, if their defense has a really good night and they stay healthy throughout the season. I think they can win a wild card game, which you ask any Steeler fan, the one thing we want is to win a playoff game. And that's like the one thing, like win a playoff game, and then, we can start to get into a retool and hopefully be in that range to draft an elite quarterback. But we'll see. It's a very big year for Mike Tomlin. There were some rumors about him potentially retiring. So we'll see what happens there. But this team, the front office, Omar Khan, Andy Weil, the Roonies, they want to win. This is I believe, the second oldest roster in the NFL. This is a roster that they believe can win the Super Bowl. Now, I don't believe it, but hey, I hope I'm wrong. And I'm sure Dan hopes too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You said it perfectly, man. We got to win a playoff game. I was in third grade last time we did it. Tough losses. Buffalo. Looking back,
Kansas City.
Jacksonville. Those were all. I liked your 2019 analysis because that was a memorable year looking back, for Pittsburgh, but they really need to kind of go back to the fundamentals at this point. And quarterback not completely solved yet. We need Will Howard to pan out first, but we knew he wasn't going to be ready to start against the Jets. That was going to Rodgers. Everybody and their mother knew that. But the thing too is Rodgers isn't going to be able to pass the ball 30 times a game or whatever. He's going to have to hand off more. So they're going to be utilizing, Jonnu Smith, Jalen Warren almost in some opportunities. So I feel like that could pan out for them. But, too, ever since going back to the 70s, the Steelers have been a defensive first team, and that's going to be no exception this year. They're going to rely heavily on their defense.
And I agree with that. And talking about Gabe's point of the organization thinks that they can win a Super Bowl this year, clearly Aaron Rodgers thinks they can too, because if not, why would he spend his last year in Pittsburgh? There's no correlation there. Now, if he went to San Francisco or something like that, a team that he could have gone to, okay, then he's just going out there for fun, but he thinks he can win. And now here's another kicker. Some rumors have been swirling about as there are a lot of players now forcing trades or at least trying to force trades going back to 2019. That is kind of around when this started. But let's talk about the big two. I mean, I think Hendrickson you can call in there, so call it a big three. Hendrickson, if you want to call him in there. But the main two outside of him, Micah Parsons and scary Terry McLaurin, forcing trades or at least trying to. Where are the landing spots? And then at the same time, what is the likelihood that these guys are actually dealt? As I think if I go to you guys, you'll say one of those two is a lot more likely to be dealt than the other, just given what the media and what really he has said on social media about his owner.
Yeah, yeah, I think Micah is not going to get traded. I mean, I've had questions about Jerry Jones for many, many years, but that would be a colossal mistake. Micah Parsons is a once in a generational player. I don't care what he says, he's not getting traded. And you got to remember, Myles Garrett said the exact same thing. He demanded a trade, and then they showed the money, and then what do you know? There's no more trade request. Terry McLaurin is interesting. He's starting to get older, but it's just really hard to imagine with where the Commanders are in terms of their team and where they were last season and their playoff success that they would trade him. I think you just bite the bullet, even though, those last year or maybe the last 2 years of that contract might be a little tough to deal with. But I mean, at the end of the day, he's too good of a player, and I don't see him regressing next season.
Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I can chime in on that. I feel like too. I remember looking back, with when Brandon Ayuk said he was going to go from San Francisco, and he was talking about all that, Myles Garrett as well, and then he ended up staying in Cleveland. But Parsons looking in his Pennsylvania roots, does he want to get closer to home? Is that what he's thinking? Does he want to go to a team that just won the Super Bowl? Does he want to come to Western PA? Who knows? But I feel like too, Jerry isn't. We all know that Jerry's one of the more crazy owners in sports. I feel like that's been well established. But Parsons, I feel like, is going to stay in Dallas for the near future. Now, if things go more south for Dallas, they don't win as many games as they plan to. They end up getting into the playoffs and they choke as normal. Then we might be able to see like emotions boil over. And Dallas, too, is starting to kind of build like players around them. Dak's getting frustrated. George Pickens is known to have a short fuse. So are they going to have issues with him? But at the end of the day, they just have these good guys. They just don't know exactly how to form together as a team like they were able to in the 90s.
And going back to the Cowboys of the past couple of years, they have traded away some stars for pennies on the dollar. I mean, you look at that Amari Cooper trade. Cleveland won it, even though they just basically dumped him to Buffalo. They won that trade easily. I think the moment that that trade was announced, everybody was really confused as to what they were trying to do. If the money's not going to be there to pay Micah, they might actually have to trade him, which, once again, is a colossal mistake. But if you're going to look at this team and say, you know what, if I can only keep two out of Dak, CB, and Micah, in my best shot to win his offense, I'm going to do that, which I don't think that's the right choice. I think if you were forced to trade it and money wasn't a construct, you trade Dak in that grouping. It's just a really tough spot for Dallas to be in as they're still in limbo As for the Commanders, that's a big gut punch if Terry says, I'm not going to play for you guys. First of all, I don't think that'd be a good decision because these guys could win the conference. There's a chance that they can. I don't know if they're the favorite pick right now, but I think they have the pieces in place. You have a really good slot guy and really a gadget guy in Deebo Samuel, along with Scary Terry. You have a good running back. You have a great quarterback. You have the pieces in place to win. The difficulty is, will these guys play? And as well, can you find a replacement? I think if you go back to 2018 when Melvin Gordon sat out and you would have said, you know what, there's this random dude named Austin on our roster that is going to be better than this guy in a year, all the Chargers fans would have called you crazy. But you look at both of their careers as the peak is gone. Austin Eckler was a lot better than Melvin Gordon at his peak. I'm not saying somebody better than Scary Terry is just randomly waiting on that roster, but that's the risk these guys play with that holdout mentality. It's going to be a tough end of the offseason, and I think this is going to be something that kind of lingers over both teams heading into the year. And going back to the point about Dallas, if they're, say, 1-6 at the deadline, I don't think Micah is going to step back on the field for them. I don't think he's really going to willingly do it, and if he does, the effort's not going to be there. And if you're Jerry Jones, you might say, you know what, we might as well get somebody who's going to give us the effort to be on the field. I know we've all seen it before in sports, whether it be high school all the way up to pro sports. If a player doesn't want to be there, the effort is not going to be there usually.
Well, too, like that's a 5-letter word that controls everything in this world, money. I mean, it's kind of like, what happened in 2018 with Le'Veon Bell when he was given an extension tag, he was given like X amount guaranteed, and he found that to be quote unquote insulting when the Steelers are really throwing the bag at him. But if you look at the way his story played out in the long run, it actually lost him money. So too, you got to be careful with that. If you're going to try to hold out or you're going to try to do this or that, you might end up losing more money in the process. Now, whenever his contract expires and he gets a better deal than what Dallas offers him, sure, that might be when he decides to jump the ship. But for now, I feel like if I were Parsons, I'd just try to stay, through with Dallas and then try to get through it. And if things end up going a different way, they go a different way.
I think that's pretty fair. And I would say a great way to wrap up our NFL portion of this podcast. Before we go, we're going to bounce on over to baseball to talk about some talking points there. But first, go across a couple of different big scores from tonight. The big one, the Guards continue to win 3-2 victory over the Mets. A great win for them today. 6 hits compared to the Mets 4. A good win there. Then you have the offensive battle for the ages as the Athletics go into Washington to take down the Nationals 16-7. This box score is just absurd. 34 combined hits in a professional baseball game. And you look at the final couple of innings, the Nationals, they had 3 runs heading into the bottom of the 9th. They scored 4. The A's started the game with 5 runs. So a lot of interesting things happening in baseball. Going over to Dan's White Sox as well. 1-1 now the score. The Mariners tied it up in the bottom of the 2nd inning. And then a big one to look at. 1-1 count, bottom of the 8th inning. On paper, the Rangers are controlling it, but it's 0-0. They have 7 hits to the Yankees 1. Rowdy Tellez is up 0 for 3 and a chance to blow that game open. But my main question for baseball, after the deadline, for the Guardians specifically, are you happy with the moves they made? Or do you want to, if they could do it over again, see more moves made?
As a fan of the Guardians, I've seen basically every player we like get traded away or be threatened to trade away, except for Hosey. So at this point, I feel like most Guards fans are numb to it, but it still was very frustrating. They spent all that time and all those resources to get Bieber back, and then they just immediately deal him after a Double-A game to Toronto. It's frustrating, but I'm glad they kept Quan. It's just they're handicapped, and all small market teams are like that. And the Guardians are more towards the extreme, I'd say. Some small market teams might spend, but you run the risk. If you fail, if these small market teams, if you miss on one signing, like sort of like the Jimenez deal, because it will destroy your team because you just won't be able to build around it. But I'm hoping the Guardians, some of the new prospects, Kafis just got called up. Let's hope he can start to rake in the majors. And I saw that Travis Bazana is starting to do well, and I believe Double A too. So only hope for Guardians is that these prospects come up fast and start hitting well. Also, Kyle Manzardo with like a 900 OPS over the last couple games. So it's a positive sign, but still, it's very hard to root for this team when you just think of the elephant in the room.
And before Dan chimes in, I do have to say the K-Fist move is great. He has been awesome. Manzo has been great. But I do have to agree, the moves made, it's tough. But Kale Steffen, seeing his stuff, he's going to be a really good pitcher. And the comparison that I saw on Twitter, at least, he traded Shane Bieber for a younger Shane Bieber. His ETA is 2027. And if you can bring him up potentially in September of next year, or say he dominates the rest of this year and you decide to throw him in the deep end, that could work. Also, keep in mind, you also do have some guys like Aaron Davenport in the minor leagues. He could be a big piece for us next year. You have Tugboat. He could be another big guy to step in. We have the pieces. We kept Quan, and that shows a good sign of things to come. Just looking at the box score from tonight to see if Kafis did anything. Looking at Kafis, struck out once. He went 0 for 4, it looks like. Actually, no, I take that back. He had 1 hit, and he had 1 run scored. So there you go. Kafis did get a hit tonight, 1 of 6 for the Guardians. Dan, I'll toss it over to you.
Thanks, Nate. And quick disclaimer, I don't really have an MLB team. I'm Catholic, so rocking the Sox hat for the Pope, and it's one of the most beautiful hats I'd say in the majors. But Cleveland, it's not their division anymore. I feel like the Tigers kind of took that over. And looking at the beginning of the year, I assumed myself that it was going to be the Guardians again, dominating. And but kind of looking through it, the way things worked out, kind of what Gabe said, of just trading away guys just nonstop that you want. And then like Jose is kind of the only guy you still have with them. Frankie used to be here. Jason Kipnis, I remember, was a huge name. I don't know how he turned out. He's going somewhere. But now Cleveland, I feel like, too, just needs to kind of realize that there's some optimism ahead, but they got to build it the right way. They don't have the same kind of momentum that they did last year, but that's okay. That just means that a new, like, time excuse me, time's coming in for Cleveland. So if they're able to build with this young core, and the Columbus Clippers too, they're AAA, and then all the way to Akron too, they look promising. So if they're able to build these guys the right way, as in just train, develop, be patient, I feel like Cleveland could definitely be scary in these next few years.
I agree. I think
And let me interject here for a minute. I want to interject here. Sorry for a minute. If Chris Antonetti needs to find some hitters, head over to Ramoto Field. They might be a couple years away, but there's some talent at Ramoto Field. Sorry for interrupting. I just had to say that.
I think Tri-C, that could be a talking point for a couple of weeks from now as they do begin their fall season. They have a lot of hitters. JB, that's the big one that has some scouts looking at him already, but you also have Miller, you have Schneider. I think we might have to do a full podcast just talking about Tri-C season. That could be a fun one. But Dan, not to be outdone, a couple of weeks ago, you went to Ford Field in Detroit on behalf of BG, but also on behalf of SmeeSports as you covered the MAC Kickoff Event. Tell us about your experience. Talk about the guys you met and just overall your thoughts as you went in there just trying to do your thing. But also, if you look on LinkedIn, you got an article written about you as well.
Yeah, I've had a lot. That article is, I met him at a play-by-play camp, so it was a cool connection I was able to make. But it kind of just started out like, all right, we're talking about the Steelers. Some people in your market like them, some people don't, to each their own. Diehard fan myself. But anyways, I was like, college football is huge right now. The MAC doesn't get the attention it deserves. I love Bowling Green, lived there my entire life, yada, yada, going to college. So I was like, let's try to find a time where we can interview Eddie George. So I reach out to our director at BG for Falcon Media. He's like, well, the MAC Media Day is coming up. You can talk to these people. I tried to talk, no reply. It's all good. So I went to the MAC website then, and I found an apply for a credential. And that was a decent process, not too long. Find out eventually we're getting in. And they were kind of like not giving us a clear yes or no. Like Thursday morning, we leave. And so we're good to go. 8:30 is around the time we get there in the morning. And we were there till I'd say around 2:30 in the afternoon. So it was quite the day. But It started out pretty simple, just breakfast with everybody, relaxing, not a lot of people there. Everybody from suits and ties to kind of just the standard, quarter zips of all the different MAC schools. But no, after breakfast, I went to go wash up a little bit, and I walk out and I see Eddie George walking in, and he's a new name for the MAC. They have 6 new head coaches, but the one that really stood up to me today or at the MAC was Jason Candle. He's entering his 10th season with the Toledo Rockets, so they're projected to win the MAC again. But when you looked at what Coach George is talking about with BG, he says that we have one goal, and that goal is to be back here come November, December and play for a MAC championship. That's at everybody's minds. That's not just his. That's every team in the MAC is striving for that. And even talking, with Kent State, they didn't have the season they wanted last year, going 0-12. I don't think anybody wants that, but now they're kind of having this, we're going to build ourselves a new image. And that word gets tossed around a lot too, I'd say, in the MAC is the word new. You look at the new head coaches, new this, new that. And so just the media day, it was really fun. Everything from playing, not College Football 26 to the press conference from Commissioner to ESPN Plus being on the upper deck to, it was just a lot of fancy people, and it was an honor to represent SmeeSports there.
All right. For those who are watching on at home, you just saw the end of take number 1, as we'll call it, as unfortunately our Zoom limitations were reached. Dan was able to give his accord of his time at the MAC kickoff. I then gave some great commentary, went into some depth about Larry Karras and that connection with Toledo. But it's all gone because it cut at 30 minutes. So we're going to try this again. I'll keep it basic here, and I'll keep it short and to the point. Toledo's head coach, Jason Candle, Mount Union alum. He was interviewed by Mount Union because he took Toledo back to Mount Union to practice last week. Defensive coordinator Vince Karras, he is an alum of Mount Union. His dad, legendary coach LK Larry Karras. Larry Karras is the man who the stadium is named after, and I believe it is his grandson, Cole Pasco, who is the starting goalkeeper and the starting power forward for Alliance Soccer and basketball, respectively. There is your MAC and Mount Union connection. And then beyond that, the other one, Kent State's quarterback, Drew DeShields. He has a lot to prove this year. They went 0-12 last year. But here's the thing. He has had a couple of big injuries. From what I was told, he grinded out a tough couple of games in the playoffs his senior year at West Branch to the point that I think he played and threw on a torn ACL. That's the story that I was told, that Drew was able to finish out a game on that. He then obviously had a red shirt. Then there's TJ DeShields, his older brother, went to Akron, had to move on from there because he didn't get the opportunities. As a 7th year last year, with Noah Boudry injured, he led Mount Union to the Stag Bowl championship game. Somehow, in some way, the Stenson Bennett of Division III, great kid, by the way, I've interviewed him, he's awesome. He led Mount Union to the Stag Bowl, and on top of that, his dad, Walt DeShields, is the head girls basketball coach at West Branch, 20 years, he's their own Mike Tomlin, as he has never gone below 500 in a season. And that officially goes through all your connections there between the MAC, Mount Union, and then I guess our friends out in Beloit. And then before we go and kind of list out what's up next on the channel, gentlemen, any closing thoughts on what we've talked about today across these 2 recordings?
I got one more MAC, and I'll give you a MAC and Steeler connection. Actually, BGSU guys, Scotty Miller.
Scotty Miller. Oh, man, that was a great name to look at back in 2020. That great catch against the Packers at the end of the first half in that NFC Championship game. Without that touchdown, Tom Brady might have not won that ring.
And legendary broadcast call, too. Joe Buck really got on for that one. Considering his past of being very enthusiastic with his broadcasting calls, in particular as a Steeler fan, I'm sure Dan has seen the clip, too, of the Troy Polamalu interception, where he sounds like he just is half asleep. Or I forget who they were playing in that game, but it sounds like he was a diehard fan of the opposing team. But, yeah, shout out Scotty Miller.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned him, and I'll give you another Bowling Green / Steeler. He's going to the BG Hall of Fame I believe this year. Omar Jacobs, number 4, he was a quarterback at BG and then played for the Steelers in the early 2000s. So there's another one. My high school, Eastwood, they have a kid at BG right now. But yeah, closing out, there's a lot going on. Cleveland's going to need to keep their nose down. I mean, if Detroit can build a superstar team they have right now, and they don't have a Judge, they don't have an Otani, they just have guys that work together. Cleveland can do it too. As for the Steelers, they're going to have to work a little extra hard this year. Defense is going to be their bread and butter. What quarterback looks like, it's going to be the Aaron Rodgers show. And we're just going to have to hope and pray that Will Howard comes back sooner than later. But there's a lot to be determined with that. We'll see a lot come week one against the Jets. And I feel like too with Shador right now, he's got to realize he's got to act like his name's, like Joe Smith. Like he can't think, oh, my dad's prime. I got to be like, forget my dad, forget Colorado, forget perfect time, and forget all that. Just if I can go out there and prove Cleveland that I'm their guy, there could be a bright future ahead. And if Cleveland can just focus on him, they don't focus on next year's class. They just focus on the now. I feel like there is a lot of upside for what Cleveland could do, and they could possibly surprise some people.
I agree with that. I think that's a great way to close out our first episode of the podcast. Thank you to Dan Ridenour and Gabe Cozza for joining us today. Thank you both for bearing with us through our technical difficulties, as this was kind of a last-minute thing. But as I said in the intro a long while ago, if we were going to start this thing, we had to start it. That was the big thing, and we got this done. Hopefully, we'll get more people on, some more storylines as the weeks go on. Next week's show, we'll see what ends up happening in the next week. I think we'll have a lot to talk about this time next week, especially given week one and preseason completely done. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how Shador did in that game. Outside of that, Gabe and I can probably talk about Premier League. Well, I could talk about it. Gabe can pretend that he knows everything that I know about the Premier League. No offense there, Gabe, but you're still getting used to it. Eventually, you'll get to that upper level of that. But I'm sure you'll be able to talk about some transfers with Tottenham, especially. They have some big guys coming in. And Man U hopefully will have Benjamin Sesko as their new striker by the time we record that next episode. And then beyond that, MLB will have a couple of extra weeks under their belt. And I'm sure something crazy will happen in the NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA. Something is going to happen, as it always finds a way to happen around this time of year. But looking ahead to our future broadcast, once again, our first game of the fall season is going to be on August 19th. We're going to be at Gabe's alma mater as Padua takes on Archbishop Hoban, two teams who made it to regionals last year in volleyball, but both were knocked out by Gilmore Academy. So that'll be a fun way to start our fall coverage and our coverage for the 25-26 school year. Beyond that, we do have some exciting announcements to make in the next couple of days. Not much content has been posted on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, but that's going to change, as it's mainly going to be, oh, by the way, we're doing this. Oh, by the way, we're doing that. That's what the next couple of weeks are going to look like content-wise. On the website, I'll try and get a couple of articles up talking about something. Might just be some football schedules. Might be just some random waffle. So make sure you check out our website at SmeeSports.com. And then beyond that, our goal is to get to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. So go down below and press that nice big red button. No cost associated, and it greatly helps out all we do. Before we go officially, gentlemen, anything you want to add in regard to your social media handles?
All right, I'll go. Yeah, I got LinkedIn, Daniel Ridenour. If you got any things, I'm starting up my own podcast called The Steel Download. Our first guest, Mitch Lyons, he is going to be on, and episode should start around tomorrow. That's going to be for all your Steelers content, maybe an opening. We'll see if Gabe wants to join with that. But for now, thank you so much for having me, Nate.
Thank you. Gabe?
I'll echo that. Thanks so much for having me. Hey, hopefully we can keep doing this. I had a lot of fun. In terms of social media, I got a LinkedIn, just Gabe Cozza on LinkedIn, but there will be some changes in terms of my online persona. I would like to have a catchy phrase that people call me by, but a lot of that's TBD, but that will be coming out very soon, shortly. So just stay tuned. Watch out for SmeeSports website. There might be an article on there, as well as maybe a potential appearance on Dan's podcast.
There we go, gentlemen. Thank you once again for joining me on this random Tuesday evening in August. Time officially 11 o'clock. So a little bit longer than expected, but we got it done. And hopefully this is a good start of a reoccurring series. We did as well just start our new interview series called SmeeSports Sit Down. So let us know if you want to see any other guests from the area. We do have a lot of good coaching contacts that could eventually lead us to, this is what I want to see. The Johnsons. I think, Gabe, you agree. If we can get Sonny and Michi in here for a 20-minute interview, that is going to be one of the best videos on this channel. So we're going to hope to make that happen. But for now, that'll do it for episode 1 of the podcast that has no name. We're going to hope to name that in the next couple of days. I'll be talking to these guys and we're going to figure it out from there. But as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your continued support of SmeeSports. We will see you all next time.